I became a surgeon after my family called me worthless. Now my sister, ex-husband, and parents are furious I'm the only specialist who can save their lives, but I referred them elsewhere. Welcome back, family. If you haven't already, subscribe and say hi in the comments. We'd love to know where you're watching from. With that, let's continue today's story. The hospital's fluorescent lights hummed above my head as I stood outside operating room 3, my hands still trembling. It was 2:47 a.m., and I'd just spent 14 hours performing emergency surgery on a gunshot victim. My surgical mask left deep indentations on my cheekbones. My scrubs were soaked with sweat beneath my white coat, the one that bore my name, Dr. Amara Williams, trauma surgeon. My phone buzzed. The 7th time in an hour. It was my mother's contact photo, a photo I'd been meaning to delete for 5 years. The text read, "Your father's having chest pains. Come home now." I closed my eyes. Not now. Not tonight. But something in my gut twisted. Despite everything, despite the years of abandonment and ridicule, I was still her daughter. Still the woman they'd spent my entire childhood telling me I'd never amount to anything. I called her back. "Finally," my mother, Patricia, shrieked. "We've been trying to reach you all evening. Your father needs immediate cardiac assessment. You're the only one who can help." "Mom, I just finished a surgical case. I'm exhausted. Have you called 911? "Of course we called 911, you selfish girl. But the ear doctors don't know what they're doing. We need you. You're supposed to help your family." There was the guilt, the obligation, the weight of blood that had kept me prisoner my entire life. I hung up and referred them to the hospital's best cardiologist, Dr. Patterson, whom I'd trained under. A man with an impeccable reputation. But even as I did it, I felt something crystallize inside me. A line was being drawn. But I didn't know yet that everything, my career, my family, my sense of self, would explode across that line within 24 hours. I didn't know that the very people I'd spent my childhood desperately trying to impress would force me to make a choice that would haunt me forever. That choice would start 11 years earlier, in a small house with peeling paint and my mother's voice like a whip. I was 8 years old, sitting at our kitchen table with my report card. Straight A's. Every single one. But my father, Edward, didn't look up from his newspaper when he saw it. "Good grades don't mean nothing if you ain't got common sense," he'd said. That was Edward's favorite phrase. He was an electrician who'd never finished community college, and he wore that decision like armor. My older brother, Deshaun, had just gotten his GED the year before. Barely. He was working at the warehouse making decent money, and my parents treated him like he'd cured cancer. My younger sister, Kenya, was always spirited and special. When she talked back to teachers, it was personality. When I asked questions in class, I was being difficult. But me, I was the middle child. The one trying too hard. The one my mother called too ambitious for her own good. The summer before 9th grade, I told them I wanted to be a doctor. I'll never forget the look on my mother's face. That mixture of pity and disdain, like I'd just announced I was planning to fly to the moon. "Amara," Patricia had said, her voice dripping with a particular kind of condescension, "doctors come from families with money. Doctors come from certain types of people. We're not those types of people. You need to understand your place." My place. That phrase followed me like a ghost. Deshaun and Kenya laughed. My father didn't defend me. He just returned to his newspaper, the silence more devastating than any words could have been. That night I cried until my stomach hurt. But I also made a promise to myself. I would prove them wrong. I would become something they couldn't ignore. Something undeniable. I didn't know then that success wouldn't feel like victory. It would feel like they'd stolen my joy and replaced it with spite. That my ambition would be fueled by years of their voices telling me I was worthless. And that fuel never really burns clean. The toxins stick to your lungs forever. High school became my proving ground. I worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I volunteered at the local hospital, filed paperwork, cleaned instruments, and observed surgeries whenever they'd let me. I was there so often that Dr. Elizabeth Ames, the hospital's lead orthopedic surgeon, started bringing me into the OR. Dr. Ames became the mother I never had. She saw me in a way my own mother refused to see me, as someone capable of extraordinary things. Your family will come around when they see what you're capable of, she told me during my senior year. They're scared. Poor families are always scared of people who leave. It feels like abandonment to them. I wanted to believe her. College was better. I earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university 2 states away. My parents didn't come to my graduation. My mother said she wasn't feeling well, and my father refused to take time off work. They'd never acknowledged that I'd done this alone. Without their support. Against their active discouragement. But Deshaun came. He cried when I walked across that stage in my cap and gown. He was the only family member who believed in me that day. Medical school was brutal. The imposter syndrome was suffocating. I was one of only 3 black women in my class of 80. Professors questioned my qualifications before I'd even opened my mouth. I worked nights at hospitals to pay for living expenses. I studied until my vision blurred. My mother called occasionally, usually to ask me for money. My father had had a small stroke, mild, but it made him more irritable. Kenya was struggling with her own family drama. They needed help with bills. Always bills. I sent money I didn't have. Every time. When I was accepted to my trauma surgery residency at a top-ranked hospital, I called to tell them. My mother's response was, "That's nice, honey. Do you know what your cousin is doing? She just opened her own salon." Her salon. Not a surgical residency at one of the country's best hospitals. A salon. That was when I first felt it. The hardening. The realization that no achievement would ever be enough. That their love came with conditions I could never meet because moving the goalposts was the whole game. But I kept sending money anyway. By my late 20s, I'd carved out a life that looked nothing like my childhood poverty. I had a beautiful apartment in the city. I drove a sensible car. Nothing fancy but reliable. I had colleagues who respected me. I was known in my field as brilliant, driven, and unflinchingly ethical. It was also profoundly lonely. I'd married Edward Jr. Yes, he had my father's name. Yes, that should have been a red flag, when I was 26. He was a pharmaceutical sales rep with charm that could fill stadiums and an emotional core made entirely of self-preservation. We were together for 6 years. Married for 3. I should have seen it coming when he started telling me I worked too much. When he began resenting the hours I spent at the hospital. When he accused me of using my career as an excuse to avoid being a real woman for him. The real kicker came when his mother had a heart attack. He begged me to use my connections to get her admitted to my hospital, to take her case, to stay with her during surgery. I did everything he asked, bringing her through a triple bypass with flying colors. She made a full recovery. 6 months later, Edward filed for divorce. "I can't be married to someone who's more powerful than me," he'd said. Those exact words. Like my competence was a personal attack on his manhood. I was 29 years old, accomplished beyond my wildest childhood dreams, and absolutely devastated that my success wasn't enough to keep my marriage together. My mother's response when I told her? Well, that's what you get for being so focused on your career. Not a single word of sympathy. No, I'm sorry you're hurting. Just blame. Just the implication that somehow my trauma surgery residency was responsible for my husband's insecurity. That's when I stopped calling as often. That's when I stopped visiting. That's when I started creating distance brick by brick between me and the people who gave me life but couldn't give me love. I threw myself into work. I was good at saving lives. Lives were so much less complicated than families. 3 years after my divorce, my brother Deshaun called me at work. I almost didn't take the call. I was about to head into surgery, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Amara, it's Mom," he said quietly. "She had a stroke. She's asking for you." The world tilted. Despite everything, despite the years of dismissal and cruelty, I felt something crack open in my chest. She was still my mother. She was still the woman who'd changed my diapers and held me when I had nightmares, before she started telling me I was worthless. "I'll be there in 2 hours," I said. I rescheduled surgery. I got in my car. And I drove back to the small house with the peeling paint for the first time in 5 years. My mother was in the ICU. The stroke had affected her speech, but her eyes were alert when I walked into the room. He tried to reach for me. Her left arm hung useless at her side. I held her right hand. It was smaller than I remembered. Softer. For 3 weeks I stayed. I coordinated her care. I called in favors from neurologists I'd trained with. I made sure she got the best physical therapy. I was her daughter, fully and completely, because that's what you do when someone you love is suffering. My father was grateful. He even said something close to an apology, which was the closest he'd ever come to acknowledging the years of damage he'd inflicted. Kenya actually apologized for laughing at my dreams in high school. I was just jealous, she'd said. I was always jealous that you got out. For a moment I thought maybe things could be different. Maybe this near tragedy could be the thing that broke through the old patterns. I was so naive. My mother recovered well. 6 months of rehab and she was walking again, though her speech remained slightly slurred. By the time she was discharged, the gratitude had evaporated, replaced by a sense of entitlement. Well, of course you helped, she'd said one afternoon. You're her daughter. That's what daughters do. She didn't thank me. She didn't acknowledge the surgery I'd rescheduled, the nights I'd slept in her hospital room, the emotional labor of returning to a place I'd spent years trying to escape. He just expected it. And I realized that I'd made a critical mistake. By showing up completely, I'd reinforced the narrative that I belonged to them. That my success, my skills, my time, it was all theirs to claim whenever they needed it. A year after my mother's stroke, I got another call. This time from Kenya. Edward, Dad, he's in the ER, she said breathlessly. He's had a massive heart attack. Amara, they don't think he's going to make it. You have to come. You have to do something. I was frozen for a moment. My father had spent my entire childhood crushing my dreams. He'd been absent during every triumph. He'd sat silently while my mother verbally eviscerated my ambitions. But he was still my father. I'm 90 minutes away, I said. I'll be there as fast as I can. When I arrived at the ER, my father was being prepped for emergency cardiac catheterization. His cardiologist was Dr. Patterson, the same doctor I'd referred my family to after that first call years ago. He was excellent. Board-certified. Experienced. But my family surrounded me the moment I stepped off the elevator. There she is, my father said weakly, reaching for me with a hand hooked to and for. The miracle worker. My brilliant daughter. Suddenly I was brilliant. Suddenly I was his daughter. Suddenly I mattered. My mother was already on him. Amara's going to fix everything. Amara's going to save him. She's a surgeon, she can do anything. Mom, Dr. Patterson is his cardiologist. He's the best in the region. Your husband is in excellent hands. But you're better, she said simply. Everyone knows you're better. You're going to take the case. I'm a trauma surgeon, not a cardiologist. This isn't my specialty. The looks on their faces. The betrayal. As if I'd just announced I was refusing to help. You can try though, Kenya said desperately. Amara, he's our father. You can at least try. That's when I said something I'd been thinking for years but never voiced. I've spent my entire life trying to save you all from the consequences of your own actions. I can't save someone from a lifetime of smoking, drinking, and refusing to exercise. Dr. Patterson can give him the best care possible. That's enough. The silence that followed was nuclear. My mother's face turned red. So you're letting him die? Your own father. I'm not letting him do anything. I'm trusting his cardiologist to do his job, which is what people with healthy boundaries do. Deshaun stood up from the corner where he'd been quiet the whole time. Amara, maybe just. Don't, I said to him. Not you too. My father ended up being fine. Dr. Patterson placed 2 stents. He was discharged 5 days later. But something had fundamentally shifted in the room when I set that boundary. My family looked at me like I'd become a stranger. Or worse, like I'd finally confirmed what they'd always feared, that I was cold, that I was selfish, that I thought I was too good for them. None of them were wrong, really. I was cold. I had to be. Cold was the only thing that kept me alive in a place where love came with conditions and criticism. But they didn't understand that I hadn't become cold despite their neglect. I'd become cold because of it. 3 months after my father's hospitalization, my mother called. Not to ask how I was. Not to see how my work was going. She called to ask if I could help her get approval for a cosmetic procedure that her insurance wouldn't cover. "I want to look good, baby," she'd said. "I want to feel young again." I listened to her request and something inside me died a little. Not dramatically. Not with anger. Just a quiet funeral for the last threads of hope that maybe someday she'd call me because she wanted to talk to her daughter. Because she was proud of me. Because she loved me. "I can recommend a plastic surgeon," I'd said. "But you'll have to pay out of pocket. It'll be about $5,000. "I can't afford that," she said. "Then, can't you help me get it covered? Don't you know someone?" "Mom, I'm a trauma surgeon. That's not really my world. You know doctors. They listen to you. You're smart. You can figure it out." There was again. The assumption that my accomplishments were leverage she could use. That my success meant I should spend my time solving her problems. I didn't help her. I told her I couldn't. I felt the sting of her disappointment, and I let myself sit with it instead of rushing to fix it. That was new. That was healing. But then came the real breaking point. I was at work in the middle of consulting on a trauma case when I got a call from Kenya. My brother Deshaun had been in a car accident. He was alive, but he had significant injuries. Broken leg, internal bleeding, possible spinal damage. They were admitting him to my hospital. I ended the call and immediately went to find him. When I saw Deshaun in the ER, bruised and bleeding and terrified, something shifted in me. He was the only one who'd shown up to my college graduation. The only one who'd ever believed in me before I'd become someone undeniable. I spent 6 hours with him that night, coordinating his care personally, consulting with orthopedic and trauma specialists, making sure he got the best possible treatment. He made it through surgery. He was going to be okay. When he was stable, I sat by his bed and cried, not from exhaustion but from the weight of it all. All the years of trying to earn love from people who didn't know how to give it. All the times I'd twisted myself into knots to be worthy of their approval. Deshaun squeezed my hand weakly. "Thank you, little sister," he whispered. "Thank you for saving me." "Always," I said. "You're the only one who ever saved me, so it's only fair." He smiled and we didn't say anything else. Some things don't need words. 3 weeks into Deshaun's recovery, my family started arriving at the hospital with requests. My mother wanted me to pull strings to get him into an exclusive rehabilitation facility. My father wanted me to lobby his surgeon for more pain medication because he felt Deshaun's discomfort was excessive. Kenya wanted me to convince the physical therapist to let Deshaun start walking earlier than recommended. Each request came wrapped in language about family and obligation. Each one felt like a test to see if I'd learned my lesson, if I was ready to get back in line. When I refused each request, they escalated. My mother showed up at my apartment building with my father and Kenya. I hadn't given them the address, so Deshaun must have mentioned it during his recovery. They surrounded me in my lobby like it was an intervention. "You're being difficult," my mother said. Her voice had that particular texture of frustration mixed with righteousness that I'd heard my entire life. "Deshaun needs help and you're being selfish. Deshaun is getting excellent care at the hospital. His surgeon is one of the best in the country." "His surgeon is fine," my father interrupted. "But you're better. And you're choosing not to help him because you think you're too good for us. That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" Kenya asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. "Amara, he's our brother. You're a surgeon. Why wouldn't you do everything you can for family?" And that's when I finally said the thing I'd been building up to for 34 years. "Because family is supposed to mean something," I said quietly. "Family is supposed to mean that you show up. That you believe in each other. That you don't just extract resources when you need them and offer nothing but criticism when you don't." My mother flinched like I'd hit her. "I had a stroke," she said. "And you came for me. You were there." "I was there because you were suffering," I said. "Not because you'd ever earned my loyalty. And you know what? The moment you recovered, you went back to treating me like I owed you something. Like my existence should be about servicing your needs." "That's not fair," my father said. His voice was low, dangerous. The voice he used when he was about to say something meant to wound. "You're right," I said. "It's not fair. It's not fair that I had to work 3 jobs in high school while you told me my dreams were impossible. It's not fair that I got into medical school and you didn't even acknowledge it. It's not fair that the only time you've ever shown me pride was when I could use my accomplishments to help you." The hallway felt smaller. The air thicker. "So what are you saying?" my mother asked, and I could hear fear underneath her anger. "I'm saying I'm not your daughter right now. I'm your daughter when I can be useful to you, and a disappointment when I can't. And I can't do this anymore. I can't live in that dynamic. I won't." I walked past them and got into the elevator. They didn't follow. Deshaun recovered beautifully. I was there through every step of his physical therapy, but I was there as his sister, not as a medical professional desperate to prove something. We didn't talk about the confrontation in the hallway, but we both knew everything had changed. Months passed. Long, strange months where my family didn't call. Where I didn't reach out. Where a canyon opened up between us and neither side seemed willing to cross it. I focused on work. I took on the hardest cases. I published research. I started mentoring young surgeons, and I was ruthless about one thing. I made sure they understood that ambition and self-respect weren't mutually exclusive. Dr. Ames, my old mentor, reached out one day. She'd heard about my family drama through hospital gossip. There's always gossip, and she wanted to take me to lunch. "You're doing the right thing," she'd said over salads we barely touched. "Setting boundaries with toxic people is always the right thing. But I know it doesn't feel right, does it? It feels like I'm betraying them," I admitted. "Like I'm abandoning them the way they think I abandoned them by leaving." "They abandoned you first," she said gently. "When you were 8 years old and told them you wanted to be a doctor. They abandoned you the moment they decided your worth was determined by how useful you could be to them." I nodded, but the guilt still lived in my chest like a stone. "The hardest thing about boundaries," Dr. Ames continued, "is that they require you to let people face the consequences of their own choices. Your mother had a stroke because of her diet, her stress, her lifestyle choices, not because you weren't there to prevent it. Your father had a heart attack for the same reasons. These aren't your failures. These are the results of their decisions." "But what if they die?" I asked, and the question surprised me with how raw it sounded. "Then you'll grieve," she said simply. "But you'll grieve as someone who loved them on your own terms, not as someone who sacrificed themselves on the altar of family obligation." It was the best advice anyone had ever given me. But knowing you're making the right choice doesn't make the loneliness any easier. 15 months after my confrontation with my family in my apartment building, my mother called my work phone. Not my personal phone. My work phone at the hospital. The message was urgent, marked as a patient relative calling. I called her back, my heart already racing. My first thought was that my father had died. My second was that something had happened to Deshaun. "Amara," my mother said, and her voice was small. Smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. What happened? Is someone hurt?" "Kenya is sick," she said. "Really sick. She went to the doctor last week because she'd been having back pain and they found something. Amar, they found cancer. Stage 3 cervical cancer." My world stopped. Kenya was 31 years old. She had 2 kids, Edward Jr. and Asha, ages 8 and 6. She'd spent years dismissing my achievements, competing with me for my parents' attention, treating me like I was somehow fundamentally untrustworthy. But she was still my sister. "Where is she?" I asked. "Which hospital?" My mother told me. It wasn't my hospital. It was across town. "She needs a specialist," my mother said. "The best gynecological oncologist in the state." And I called around and everyone says that's you. Everyone says Dr. Williams is the best in her field. "Mom, I'm a trauma surgeon. That's not my specialty." I know what you are," she interrupted. And there was something different in her voice. Something like desperation. "And I know you've been angry with us. I know we haven't been. I know we haven't been good to you. But Kenya is my daughter. She's your sister. And if anyone can save her, it's you." I should have referred her to the actual gynecological oncologist. There were several excellent ones in the state. probably better than me at handling cervical cancer. But Kenya was my sister. And despite everything, despite the years of distance and resentment, I couldn't refuse. I went to see her that afternoon. Kenya was in a hospital bed, looking smaller than she'd ever been. Her hair was wrapped in a scarf. She was wearing a hospital gown that made her look like she was 12 years old. "Amara," she said when she saw me, and she started crying. "Hey," I said, and I took her hand. "It's okay. We're going to get you the best care possible." "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm so scared." I stayed with her that afternoon. I looked at her imaging. I consulted with her physicians. And against every bit of professional judgment that told me this wasn't my field, I agreed to coordinate her oncology care alongside her designated specialist, Dr. Rachel Monroe. Dr. Monroe was excellent. She had a 72% 5-year survival rate for stage 3 cervical cancer, better than the national average. She had the respect of every physician in her field. She was exactly who Kenya needed. But Kenya only wanted me. "You're my sister," she'd said when I explained Dr. Monroe's qualifications. "You know me. You care about me. I want you to be the one in charge." "I'm not an oncologist," I'd explained. "But you'll be here," she said. "You'll make sure I get everything I need. You'll make sure they don't give up on me." So I stayed. I coordinated her care. I was there for every appointment, every treatment, every breakdown. And my family started coming back around. Slowly at first, then with increasing frequency. They weren't apologizing. They weren't even really asking how I was doing. But they were there, and they were grateful, and in some twisted way that felt like enough. It wasn't enough. I just didn't know it yet. Kenya's treatment was brutal. She endured chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. There were complications. There were times when we didn't know if she was going to make it. But she fought. And I was there through every moment. My family watched me sit at Kenya's bedside for 16-hour shifts. They watched me advocate for her when new symptoms emerged. They watched me hold her hand while she vomited from chemo. They watched me become the thing I'd promised myself I'd never be again, completely invested in saving them. 2 years into her treatment, as Kenya was approaching what looked like remission, my parents called a family meeting. All of us, Deshawn, Kenya, my parents, and me, sitting in my parents' living room on a Saturday afternoon. "We need to talk about something important," my father said. He was talking differently these days since his heart attack. More slowly. With more intention. "Kenya's insurance won't cover all of her bills," my mother continued. "There are experimental treatments that aren't FDA approved yet, and there are trips to specialists out of state. We need to figure out how we're going to pay for all of it." "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "About $200,000, my father said quietly. My breath caught. "We know you have savings," my mother said. "We know you make good money. And we know that Kenya needs us to be there for her. We need you to be there for her." There was a long silence. "We're not asking you to pay for everything," Deshawn said, trying to soften what was essentially a request to deplete my life savings. "We're all going to contribute what we can. But you make the most money, and Kenya is your sister. I've already spent over $50,000 on her care," I said quietly. "I took a leave of absence from work. I've rescheduled surgeries. I've given her my time, which is actually worth more than money." "We know," my mother said. "And we're grateful. But gratitude doesn't pay medical bills." I looked at Kenya. She was looking at the floor. "Are you asking me to do this?" I asked her directly. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't know what else to do," she said quietly. In that moment I understood what had really been happening. Every time I'd shown up for them, every time I'd chosen family obligation over my own well-being, they'd internalized a message that I was responsible for them. Not just emotionally but literally. That my success was theirs to claim and my resources were theirs to use. "I can't do this," I said. "I can't be your financial safety net. I won't." My parents' faces went blank. Kenya started crying. "So you're letting your sister die?" my father asked. And his voice was so cold, so certain of my guilt, that I almost believed him. "No," I said. I'm letting her live with the consequences of her own choices. I'm letting you all live with the consequences of your choices. And I'm finally taking care of myself. I got up and left. As I walked out of that house, I heard my mother say, I can't believe she's doing this to us. After everything we've done for her. After everything they'd done for me. Right. Like having me, raising me with cruelty, crushing my dreams under their fear and poverty, and then expecting me to fix their problems was everything. I drove home and I didn't cry. I just felt empty. Like something had finally broken inside me that couldn't be repaired. 6 months later, I got a call from Deshawn. Kenya had taken a turn for the worse. The experimental treatment had failed. The cancer had spread to her liver. I knew what was coming and I went numb. Amara, I know you're upset, Deshawn said carefully. But she's asking for you. She wants to see you. I didn't want to go. I was tired of being needed. Tired of the cycle of hope and disappointment, of showing up just to be treated like I owed them something. But I went anyway. Kenya was in hospice. She had maybe 3 weeks left, according to her doctors. She'd lost most of her hair, lost significant weight. She was almost translucent, like she was already becoming a ghost. When she saw me, she cried. I'm so sorry, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry we weren't better to you. I'm so sorry I wasn't a better sister. I held her hand and for the first time in years I let myself cry too. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, I said. You saved me for the last 2 years, she whispered. You were here. You fought for me. That was everything. She died 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning in March. I was there. Deshawn was there. My parents were there and they were devastated in a way I'd never seen before. Not performing grief but actually broken by it. At the funeral my mother approached me. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. I want you to know something, she said. I want you to know that you were brilliant. You always were. And I was scared of it. I was scared that you were going to leave us and never come back. And so I tried to cut you down. I tried to make you small. Because small daughters stay close to their mothers. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. The realization had come too late. It had arrived in a hospice room with a dying woman, and it couldn't change anything. I love you, she said. I know, I replied. But I don't think that was ever really enough. It's been a year since Kenya died. The grief is complicated. It's tangled up with guilt and anger and love and relief. Some days I can barely breathe under the weight of it. Other days I feel nothing at all. My parents are aging faster now. My father's heart has weakened. My mother is having memory issues. Early stage cognitive decline, they think. Deshawn calls me every Sunday and I take the calls, but we mostly talk about his kids, his job, his life. We don't talk about our family. I've set new boundaries. I send my parents money for their medical care, their mortgage, their needs. But I don't visit. I don't sit with them during their surgeries. I recommend doctors and specialists, but I don't coordinate their care. I've drawn a line and I stand on one side of it. It's lonely here on this side of the line. But it's also quiet. It's also mine. I mentor young surgeons now, especially young women of color who come into medicine with that same desperation to prove something. I tell them, prove it to yourself first. Prove it to the work. Because proving it to the people who doubted you will never feel like enough. They don't always believe me. I didn't believe it either, not until I'd spent 34 years chasing validation from people who couldn't give it. The cruel joke of it is that I became everything they said I couldn't be. I became a doctor. I became brilliant. I became undeniable. But in the process of becoming those things, I had to become someone they wouldn't recognize. Someone who couldn't be bent to their will. Someone who understood that love, real love, shouldn't feel like a transaction. When my mother called last month and said my father was having chest pains again, I felt that familiar pull. That ancestral weight trying to drag me back into the familiar pattern of sacrifice and resentment. Call 911, I said. The ambulance knows where to take him. Amara, please. I hung up. Dr. Patterson's team handled his case. My father was fine. Another few stents, another discharge, another reminder that I cannot save people from themselves. What I've learned is this. You can achieve everything they said was impossible. You can become successful beyond measure. You can cure diseases and save lives and earn accolades that line your walls. But none of it matters if the people you do it for are never satisfied. And sometimes, the cruelest sometimes, they'll die before they learn to be satisfied. They'll take their refusal to see your worth to the grave. Kenya's kids call me sometimes. Her oldest, Edward Jr., wants to be a doctor. I'm helping him with his college applications. I'm being the adult who believed in him from day one, because that's what I needed and never received. I'm breaking the cycle for the next generation. That has to be enough. That has to be something. The truth is, I won't ever fully heal from this. Some wounds don't close. They just become scars that ache when the weather changes. But I'm learning to live with the ache. I'm learning that boundaries aren't walls. They're just the place where I end and everyone else begins. If you're watching this and your family makes you feel small, makes you feel like your ambitions are too big or too unrealistic, let me tell you something. You're not wrong for wanting more. You're not selfish for protecting your peace. You're not betraying anyone by refusing to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. You're just finally learning how to survive. The cost of that survival is that some people won't love you anymore. Some people will call you selfish and cold. Some people will watch you succeed and refuse to celebrate because your success makes them feel like failures. Let them. Because the alternative is spending your entire life twisted into knots, trying to be small enough to fit into their expectations, talented enough to be proud of, but not so talented that you intimidate them. That's not a life. That's a cage. I closed that cage door 1 year ago and I'm not going back inside. Do I wish things had ended differently? Every single day. I wish my mother had called me to ask how I was doing, not just what I could do for her. I wish my father had shown up to just one, of my important moments. I wish Kenya had lived to become the woman she was trying to become. But wishes don't change anything. Actions do. And my action now is radical self-preservation. It's telling my parents I love them but I can't be their daughter in the way they need me to be. It's acknowledging that Deshaun is the only family member I have a healthy relationship with, and protecting that relationship like it's precious because it is. It's knowing that when my parents die, and they will sooner rather than later, I'll grieve them. But I'll grieve them as someone who loved them and was failed by them. Not as someone who sacrificed everything and was never enough. That's the ending I get. That's the closure I'm building myself, brick by brick, boundary by boundary. If you're in a similar situation, if your family is asking you to set yourself on fire, if they're using your love as leverage, if they're teaching you that you only matter when you're useful, please know this. You have permission to say no. You have permission to leave. You have permission to build a life that doesn't include the people who broke you. It won't feel noble. It will feel like abandonment and betrayal and guilt that lives in your bones like cold. But on the other side of that guilt is the quiet possibility of peace. And peace, I'm learning, is worth more than all the gratitude in the world. This is my story. This is my truth. And if it helped you understand that you're not alone in this particular kind of pain, then Kenya's death, my years of struggle and my family's cruelty meant something. They meant something because they helped you see that you deserve better. That's all any of us can really do, survive our own stories and help someone else survive theirs. Rest easy, Kenya. I'm taking care of your babies. I'm taking care of myself. And maybe finally that's enough.